So today we are going to be discussing jhana, and I'm going to be reading from Majjhima Nikaya 111, Anupada Sutta, one by one as they occurred. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, Sariputta is wise. Sariputta has great wisdom. Sariputta has wide wisdom. Sariputta has joyous wisdom. Sariputta has quick wisdom. Sariputta has keen wisdom. Sariputta has penetrative wisdom. During half a month, bhikkhus, Sariputta gained insight into states one by one as they occurred. Now Sariputta's insight into states one by one as they occurred was this. So here the Buddha is praising Sariputta for his wisdom. Sariputta has been known to be the one who was very keen with his wisdom. He was very penetrative with his understanding of the Dhamma. If you look at Digha Nikaya number 32 and 33, or 33 and 34, you'll see that Sariputta lays out the entire Dhamma one by one in different numerical categories. So his understanding of the Dhamma is great, like the ocean. And that is why he is one of the Buddha's chief disciples. The other chief disciple is Moggallana, Mahamoggallana, who was an adept at psychic faculties. So Sariputta was more, let's say, head-centered, whereas Moggallana was more heart-centered, more intuitive, so to speak. So here the Buddha is praising Sariputta's wisdom, and when he talks about the different kinds of wisdom that he says he has great wisdom, wide wisdom, joyous wisdom, quick wisdom, keen wisdom, penetrative wisdom. This is all pointing to the same thing. This wisdom, when he says wise or wisdom, he's referring to the understanding of dependent origination, and therefore also pointing to the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. Here, bhikkhus, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. So now we're talking about the first jhana. What is part of the first jhana? First and foremost, quite secluded from sensual pleasures. This means that the mind is secluded from any sensory activity. It's not paying attention to any kind of sensory activity. First of all, when you sit down to meditate, generally speaking, you close your eyes. So you shut off any kind of sensory experience through vision. And as you bring or establish mindfulness before you, that is to say, you relax the mind and body, and now come to the intention of bringing up loving kindness, you are here with the mind. Sensual pleasures have to do with pleasures related to the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. These are the 5 chords of sensual stimulation, as the Buddha calls them. And so sensual pleasures that we experience through these 5 physical sense bases are one kind of pleasure. But now the Buddha is talking about a different kind of pleasure. The only way you can let go of your attachment to certain pleasures is to understand them, acknowledge them, and then replace them with a pleasure that is greater. So, in other words, there was this great scientist named R. Buckminster Fuller. And he said, you never fight the existing reality, or you never replace the existing reality by fighting it. You put a new model in its place so that the old one becomes obsolete. So when you have greater mental pleasure, then the sensual pleasure seems weak, seems uninteresting. And so the purpose of jhana is multifaceted. There's different ways of understanding jhana. But primarily, you are getting into jhana because you are letting go of the grosser sense pleasures. So when you still your mind, you collect your mind around an intention of bringing up loving kindness, you are now with the mind. Secluded from unwholesome states. What are unwholesome states? The 5 hindrances. So to be in a jhanic state of mind, there are 2 components, generally speaking, and this is the way I would explain it, and this is the way I have understood and experienced it. A jhanic state is void of any kind of hindrance, and it has the presence of the 7 enlightenment factors in varying degrees. That's the basis for any jhanic state. No hindrance present, and the presence of enlightenment factors. And you'll see why I say this as we progress through the jhanas. And so this is accompanied by applied and sustained thought. That's the vitakka and vichara, thinking and examining thought. In this tradition, the way we interpret this is when you intentionalize bringing up a feeling of loving kindness, that is the applied thought. And when you put your mind or rest your awareness on that feeling, that is the sustained thought. With rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, this is very important to understand. When you let go of the hindrance in your mind, for that moment your mind feels relief. And in that relief, there is happiness. And this is the rapture, the piti, and the sukha. That sukha is comfort in the body. Your body feels very comfortable and stable. Born of seclusion, which means born of having let go of the hindrances. Through the non-presence of the 5 hindrances, the mind feels relief. Therefore, it starts to experience joy. Therefore, it starts to experience happiness and comfort in the mind and body. And the states in the first jhana, the applied thought, the sustained thought, the rapture, the pleasure, and the unification of mind, ekargata, the unification of mind. Generally speaking, ekaggata is translated as single-pointedness or one-pointedness of mind. I would look at this as being a unified mindset. And the way I would explain that is the same analogy as I used before, which is the mind, its attention is not scattered. Its attention is together, unified towards one object. But that doesn't mean that necessarily that it becomes so focused and so concentrated that it suppresses everything else in that process. The mind orbits or stays with the theme of loving kindness all throughout the meditation. The attention revolves around the feeling of loving kindness. Or another way to put it is the awareness is imbued with loving kindness. The awareness rests in that feeling of loving kindness. The contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind, the zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. The contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind. Here I'll say attention as well. These constitute mind. Mind is only known by its factors. When we look at dependent origination, we look at one of the links of dependent origination, which is Nama Rupa. Rupa is the physical form, the body, which is made up of the four great elements, or the states of matter. And Nama, which is made up of the mental factors of contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. So what is the contact here that we're experiencing? This is contact with mind and the mind object, which is the loving kindness. The feeling, which is the actual feeling of loving kindness. The perception, which is perceiving that the mind is experiencing loving kindness. The intention begins when you have the intention to stay with the feeling of loving kindness, or to bring up and then stay with the feeling of loving kindness. And the attention here is the spotlight on which the loving kindness is. When the spotlight goes away towards something else, which is a distraction, that's when you use the 6 R's. That's when you recognize you're distracted. You release your attention from that. You relax the tightness and tension in mind and body. Come back to the smile, return back to your object of meditation. Now the spotlight is gently brought back to the feeling of loving kindness. That is your attention. Zeal. The zeal here is the chanda, the wholesome inclination of mind. The wholesome inclination of mind starts when you want to have loving kindness in your heart. When your mind inclines towards letting go. When your mind inclines towards nibbana. This is the chanda that we talk about. The decision here is adhimokho. Resolving yourself to sitting down and meditating. Energy. Here we're talking about having the balanced energy. Not too much, not too little. Too much energy and you will feel a lot of restlessness arising. Too little and you will start to feel dullness of mind. And so that balance of energy is brought up by right effort through the 6 R's. Mindfulness. That is the sati. Remembering to stay observant of your object of meditation. In this sense, when you are meditating, what you're actually doing, or what you will be doing as you start to progress through this practice, is you are actually watching mind meditating. You are not the meditator. You are watching the mind meditate. This is metacognition. Equanimity. This equanimity, this upekkha that we speak of, that is seeing things as they actually are without getting affected by what it is you are seeing or experiencing. So there is a level of dispassion that arises through this equanimity. And there is a level of distance from the observer and the object of observation, so to speak. And, as I said, attention. So here the mind that we speak of is really consciousness, your awareness of what is arising and passing away. So the awareness is one thing, and the awareness flows through where the attention is put. So in other words, the spotlight goes in one direction, and so now the awareness through that attention goes to that loving kindness. So your mind becomes imbued with that loving kindness. These are the different states that Sariputta was able to distinguish and delineate in this particular jhana. And he does that for every single jhana as he progresses. That's not the goal here. You don't have to do that. But it allows you to see what it is that you are experiencing. As you progress and become better with jhanas, your attention becomes clearer. You yourself will be able to see these different states arising and passing away. And this is where we talk about the samatha and vipassana coming together. The samatha aspect is the factors of the jhana present in the mind, and the vipassana aspect is what Sariputta experiences now. It says, these states were defined by him one by one as they arose, or as they occurred. Known to him those states arose, known they were present, known they disappeared. What is he seeing here? He is seeing the impermanent nature of the different factors involved in that jhana. So he's not getting tied up in that experience. He is seeing for himself that this jhana itself is impermanent and therefore should not be held on to if it changes, if anything happens. Therefore, it says, he understood thus, so indeed these states not having been come into being, having been they vanish. Regarding those states he abided unattracted, unrepelled, independent, detached, free, disassociated, with a mind rid of barriers. He didn't get caught up in the experience of the jhana. Didn't get caught up in whether he was experiencing jhana or not. Just observing like a movie. This is how your practice will be. You're just watching how the different states arise with the loving kindness as your object, being the anchor for your mind, being the anchor for your mind's attention. And so you are just glued to your seat, watching what the latest episode is in this series of your mind. Watching the movie go by. That's it. And in doing so, you remain disassociated. You remain detached, independent, with the mind rid of barriers. He understood there is an escape beyond, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. There's another way to understand jhana here. Jhanas, I propose, are levels of cessation. We experience nirodha, which is the cessation of suffering altogether. But on the way to it, you experience certain jhanas. And these jhanas cease coarser and coarser experiences, automatically, progressively, naturally. So as you progress through these stages of insight, facilitated by the jhana, you start to see your subtler and deeper layers of the mind, as the coarser layers start to cease, because your attention goes from one layer to the deeper layer. The other thing to understand with jhana is that you think about it this way. The feeling of loving kindness, or whatever your object of meditation might be, whether it's radiating the Brahmaviharas, whether it's quiet mind, whatever it might be, that's the conversation. Let's say you are sitting in a room somewhere and you're having a conversation. So you, the observer, are watching the object of meditation. This is your conversation. Maybe you're in a restaurant, or maybe you're somewhere where there is ambient noise. Maybe there's music playing, there's chattering going on here and there. Now, if you put your attention on the ambient noise, you lose awareness of what it is the other person is saying. In the same way, these different factors that are present in the mind are just the background of the mind. The jhana is just the background, letting you know where you are in your path, in your quest for nibbana. But if you pay attention to the ambient noise, or you pay attention to the factors of the jhana, you're not going to be paying attention to the loving kindness. And now your mind becomes distracted by this or that. There can be a tendency for the mind to mistake the joy factor of the jhana for the metta, or the happiness factor, or whatever it might be. And by doing so, a person feels like the metta has disappeared, because they have mistook the joy for the metta. The joy will invariably disappear as you progress. So don't mistake the factor of the jhana for the object of meditation. Again, bhikkhus, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, Sariputta entered and abided in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind without applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of collectedness. So now when you get to the second jhana, you are no longer having any applied and sustained thought. The thinking and examining thought disappeared. That doesn't mean that there won't be background thoughts, but there won't be any more intentionalizing of bringing up the feeling of loving kindness. Once the awareness rests on the loving kindness, this is what is meant when the mind lets go of what brought up the loving kindness and stays with just the loving kindness. So now the initial intentionalizing of bringing up through phrasing, bringing up through memories, bringing up through gratitude, whatever it is that works for you, All of that is let go of, and now you just stay with the loving kindness. And now, once you stay with the loving kindness, there is this smoothness that happens. The mind just continues with that feeling of loving kindness. And this is where the self-confidence arises. Now the mind is established in staying with the loving kindness. It feels confident. There is no more doubt that it is actually in meditation at this point. Singleness of mind. Again, this is part of that ekagata, singleness of mind. The mind now doesn't have anything else going on except for staying with that feeling of loving kindness. There is no presence of any more disturbing thoughts. No more presence, even in the background, that starts to dissipate. There might be little wisps here and there, but that's no big deal. Those little wisps come and go, but if you pay attention to them, that's where the trouble is. If you allow them to just go on by and stay with the feeling, everything will be fine. With rapture and pleasure born of collectedness. Look at the difference here. In the first case, the first jhana, was rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. The second jhana is rapture and pleasure born of collectedness. The difference here is, in the first case, the rapture, the joy, the happiness that arises is because of the relief from not having the 5 hindrances in the mind. In the second case, it's because the mind has become more focused, more collected, more confident in its practice. And the states in the second jhana, the self-confidence, the rapture, the pleasure, and the unification of mind, the contact, feeling, perception, intention, and mind, the zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, those states arose. Known, they were present. Known, they disappeared. And with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is an escape beyond this. Again, bhikkhus, with the fading away as well of rapture, Sariputta abided in equanimity. And mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body, he entered upon and abided in the third jhana, on account of which the noble ones announce, he has a pleasant abiding who has equanimity and is mindful. So as you progress from the second to the third jhana, what you will notice is that joy. Now that joy can arise in various degrees. That joy can manifest as heat in the body. That joy can manifest as heat or warmth in the hands. That joy can manifest as an elation in the heart. That joy can manifest as vibration in the body. That joy can manifest as tingling in the body, or just a sense of well-being. Different degrees of joy. But those will all start to dissipate and quiet down and calm down. And what you will be left with is tranquility. In the third jhana, there is an experience there, which is the pleasure with the body, which here the Buddha talks about, which is where you feel either the body is very much rooted in the earth and so quite grounded and heavy, or you feel like the body is very light and floating. Sometimes you will feel like parts of the body disappear. Sometimes you feel like you're only up in the head and the complete body from the neck down has gone. Different degrees. Sometimes you'll feel like the feeling of loving kindness has expanded. It's starting to radiate. It's starting to go beyond just the body and fill up around your body like an aura. So these are the different things that can happen in the third jhana. And so you have greater equanimity and mindfulness here. So there is a greater degree of clarity in the mind. That self-confidence then translates into greater clarity of mind. There is a quality of spaciousness in the mind. There's a quality of pristine awareness in the mind. And the mind is just with the loving kindness and nothing else. Very quiet, very still. For the most part. Again, Don't get disturbed if you see thoughts in the background. It's fine. It's okay. The mind is not always going to be as quiet as you think it's going to be. But it will be quiet enough. And the states in the third jhana, the equanimity, the pleasure, the mindfulness, the full awareness. The full awareness. Do you remember this phrase, the full awareness? Sampajanya. Full awareness. And unification of mind, the contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind, the zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, those states arose. Known, they were present. Known, they disappeared. So here's again a very key emphasis on not getting attached to the experience that you're having. Whatever experience you're having, just experience it. Allow it to be there. But don't try to judge what it is. Don't try to analyze what it is. Don't try to hold on to the experience, no matter how good it feels. All these experiences are volitionally produced. They are dependently arisen and therefore liable to pass away. So don't hold on to them. They will go away. He understood that there is an escape beyond this, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, bhikkhus, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. When you get into the fourth jhana, the feeling of loving kindness starts to expand up into the head. By this time, you stop feeling the body. You might feel it a little bit, but now you're up in the head. Now you are almost fully in just the mind. And oftentimes you know you're in the fourth jhana, or Venerable Methananda and I will know you are in the fourth jhana by the way you speak and by the way you enter the room. It's all good. Everything is fine. Everything is very balanced. People speak in a very even-toned manner. They're just very chill and relaxed. There's absolute equanimity in the mind. They don't care about anything. Doesn't matter what's going on. Did they miss their lunch? No big deal. It's raining outside? No big deal. It's all good. You know, they're just completely relaxed, tranquil, and equanimous. And the purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. What's happening as you progress through the jhanas is you're actually cycling through the enlightenment factors, and they start to gain momentum and strength. There is a way to understand the enlightenment factors in a couple of ways. They are linear. That is to say, mindfulness leads to investigation of states, which leads to energy, which leads to joy, which leads to tranquility, which leads to collectedness, which leads to equanimity. But they also cycle through as you progress through the jhanas. And so by the time you are in the fourth jhana, the mindfulness is so clear, so crisp, due to that equanimity. So in other words, when you're cycling through, you have mindfulness, investigation of states, energy, joy, tranquility, collectedness, equanimity, which then informs the next cycle of mindfulness, investigation of states, energy, joy, tranquility, collectedness, and then equanimity, which continues to further strengthen that mindfulness. So by this time in the fourth jhana, the purity of mindfulness due to equanimity means that the mindfulness is completely stable. You are able to stay with your object of meditation for longer periods of time. Initially, there's instability. Maybe you're staying with the object for 10 seconds. Later you're staying there for 30 seconds. Later you're staying there for about 45 seconds, about a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes at a time, and so on. And the states in the fourth jhana, the equanimity, the neither painful nor pleasant feeling, neutral feeling, just very tranquil, relaxed. The mental unconcern due to tranquility. You don't care about what's going on. You're pretty content, very content with that tranquility. The purity of mindfulness and the unification of mind. The contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind. The zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, these states arose, known they were present, known they disappeared. He understood thus there is an escape beyond this, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, bhikkhus, with the complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the base of infinite space. There are only these 4 jhanas. Now, from here on out, you are experiencing the ayatanas. These are the base of experiences. These are the dimensions or planes of experience that are rooted in the 4th jhana. They are spheres of experience that are rooted in the 4th jhana. So here, what is happening? When your mind, when the loving kindness reaches up to the head, Venerable Metananda and I will give you a certain kind of practice to do. This is a practice you do only in 1 or 2 sits. After that, we will change your meditation into what's known as the 6 directions. And the 6 directions means that you send out the feeling of loving kindness universally, indiscriminately to all living beings in every direction. As you're doing this, you are no longer in the body. The mind feels expansive, starts to expand. And so you surmount the perception of form with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, no longer paying attention to what's going on with the body or the senses. That doesn't mean that they're closed off. All it means is your attention is very much rooted in what is happening in the mind. If a fly is buzzing around, you might still hear it distantly. If it comes and lands on your hand, you might feel it, but very faintly. So that means the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact. So when I talk about jhanas being levels of cessation, here's what we're talking about. The first jhana, what ceases? The hindrances. The second jhana, what ceases? The thinking and examining thought. The third jhana, what ceases? The joy factor. The fourth jhana, what ceases? The happiness and pleasure related to the body. Now, what is commonly known as the fifth jhana, but really infinite space, what ceases? It's the perception of form. Now you are in your mind. You have the idea that you don't have a body. Now you are completely in the mind. And you are in this vast spaciousness which arises. This edgeless space, boundless space. This is the awareness that space is infinite. Because as you send out the feeling of loving kindness in all directions, they keep going for as long as you can keep them going with your intention. Beyond the earth, beyond the solar system, beyond the galaxy, beyond the universe and other universes. It just keeps expanding. And so you have this awareness that space is infinite. But that is not the object, remember. That is just the background experience of the mind, that the infinitude of space. The object is still radiating, sending out loving kindness. You are in a bubble that keeps expanding, or you are the candle flame that keeps radiating outward infinitely, all throughout space. And the states in the base of infinite space, the perception of the base of infinite space, and the unification of mind, the contact, feeling, perception, intention, and mind, the zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, those states arose. Known, they were present. Known, they disappeared. He understood thus that there is an escape beyond this, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, bhikkhus, by completely surmounting the base of infinite space, aware that consciousness is infinite, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the base of infinite consciousness. Now, when you get into infinite space, that feeling of loving kindness, the metta that you experience, that you're radiating, starts to soften up. And it gradually turns into karuna, compassion. That karuna is tied to the experience of infinite space. Now you feel compassion for all living beings. You wish the end of suffering for all living beings. You recognize the suffering in your own self, in your own mind, and therefore understand the suffering in other beings. Sometimes when you have this experience, you'll have a flash of insight that might arise. A person comes into your mental field that might need your help. And obviously now you're on retreat, but if you do this off retreat, you might find more often than not that you get a sense that this person needs your help. And you might call them up. Or they might call you up and say, hey, I'm in this situation, I need your help. Right? Or you call them up and they say, I was just thinking about you. So it has happened in people's experience when they do radiate compassion and experience this infinitude of space, that they have a connection with other living beings. And then you get into what's known as infinite consciousness. And here that feeling of compassion, which was soft, starts to become empathetic joy. There's a different quality of joy here, a very subtle happiness. The celebration of beings being happy. Enjoying the fact that some beings are experiencing relief from suffering. It feels like relief in your own mind. There's a sense of relief and joy in your mind. This is empathetic joy, mudita, which is tied to the experience of infinite consciousness. Now here, generally the idea is when you see or perceive that consciousness is infinite, the general idea has been that the awareness expands to the limits of infinite space, and then that becomes the awareness. But what we are talking about here goes a little bit deeper than that, which is, yes, you see that fluid awareness for some time, but then you start to see what that awareness is actually made up of. In the same way, you would see a ray of light as one ray of light, but really it's made up of quintillions and quintillions of individual photons. The same way, the fluidity of consciousness is made up by iotas of individual arising and passing away of sensory consciousnesses. And the way you would experience this if you were experiencing eye consciousness You might experience a ring of light in the periphery of your vision, or you might experience flickering behind your eyelids. If you're a musician and your ears are more refined, you might experience flickering in the ears. You might experience the tap, tap, tap in the ears. Some people have phantom smells. Some people have tingling in the tongue or phantom tastes that arise. Some people have tingling in their face, vibration in their body. And so this is the arising and passing away of infinite consciousnesses. Some people are able to see the gaps between thoughts. And it just doesn't have to happen that it happens in the sitting meditation. It has happened where people are just walking around and suddenly they see the individual frames of reality slowing down. When you used to see a film which had actual film, a movie which had actual film, and if you slowed it down, you could start to see the individual film in that reel, the individual frames in that film reel, and you start to see things slow down. It has happened that people experience this. You might see the flags waving in the air and then suddenly they just slow down. Or you might see people moving as if they're under some kind of strobe light, and you see every other second movement of their being. So this is also part of infinite consciousness. You might start to hear something in the distance, and you hear every other sound wave happening or arising. And so it slows down, and you're perceiving the experience. What you are seeing is the arising and passing away of individual contact internally in the mind in relation to that sense field. And the states in the base of infinite consciousness, the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, and the unification of mind, the contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind, the zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, those states arose. Known, they were present. Known, they disappeared. He understood thus, there is an escape beyond this, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, bhikkhus, by completely surmounting the base of infinite consciousness, aware that there is nothing, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the base of nothingness. Now what happens is, as you see the arising and passing away of sensory consciousnesses, let's say you're seeing it through your eyes and you're seeing the flickering, eventually you see the gaps in between each flicker, and those gaps start to widen. Or if you're seeing that ring of light starts to dissipate and there is nothing present, no thing present. Or you hear the flickering in the ears or whatever it might be, and you start to notice the gap in between the arising and passing away of each of these experiences. And these gaps start to widen more and more and more until they become part of your mental field. And this is the perception of no thingness. There is nothing present in the mind. The mind becomes disinterested in any kind of experience altogether. The reason is because as you see the arising and passing away of consciousnesses, you experience for yourself firsthand the three characteristics. That is to say, you see for yourself the impermanent nature of experience. And thereby, as you start to see the arising and passing away, what happens? It becomes tiresome for your mind. Your mind says, okay, I've seen enough. That's the dukkha. That's the suffering. And then you realize that there's actually no controller over here. It is arising and passing away dependent upon causes and conditions. And thereby you experience anatta. So the perception of anicca leads to the perception of dukkha. The perception of dukkha leads to the perception of anatta. The perception of anatta leads to the perception of equanimity. And now this equanimity becomes your object, which you continue to radiate. All throughout, you've been radiating compassion through infinite space. empathetic joy through infinite consciousness. Now, equanimity through nothingness. Now, as you radiate that equanimity, your mind becomes quieter and quieter and quieter. Until what happens is your mind decides that it doesn't feel like it wants to radiate anymore. So the analogy that I use is you have a pebble that you drop right into the surface of the lake, and the ripples continue on until they stop. And you keep doing that until your mind says no more. And now mind just wants to rest in itself. And so now you get into where your mind is the quiet mind. There's still some activity there, but we call it the quiet mind. This is the luminous mind, the radiant mind, the pabhasara chitta. And so it says, and the states in the base of nothingness, the perception of the base of nothingness, and the unification of mind, the contact, feeling, perception, volition, and mind. The zeal, decision, energy, mindfulness, equanimity, and attention. These states were defined by him one by one as they occurred. Known to him, these states arose. Known, they were present. Known, they disappeared. He understood thus, there is an escape beyond this, and with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, bhikkhus, by completely surmounting the base of nothingness, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Now, quiet mind here becomes the object. The mind itself becomes the object. Mind rests within itself. The awareness of awareness. People describe this experience as being asleep but awake at the same time. It is like a lucid, deep sleep. Nothing much going on. Initially, they might experience some kind of lucid dreaming, so to speak, some kind of disconnected thoughts that arise, some kinds of patterns and shapes and colors and disconnected thoughts, as if they have memories from a life they never knew. And so sometimes people will access past lives through this particular jhana. But those are all distractions. Understand them to be just the quality of this particular eighth jhana. The reason it's called neither perception nor non-perception is because there is no full recognition of what's going on. Perception here is the recognizing of what is arising. Feeling is the experiencing. The recognition of that experience is perception. Perception is rooted in memory. When you are a child, let's say, or a child goes to a stove fire and puts their hand atop that fire, they feel the heat and then they feel it burning. Now that experience is there, rooted in their mind. The next time they approach fire, they're aware that it can be hurtful, so I better be cautious. That awareness or that knowing is perception that is rooted in the memory of a previous experience. So when you see this as the color red, you know it because when you were in kindergarten, you learned what the color red was, or blue, or that this is a tree, or what type of tree this is. This is a bird, what type of bird this is. This is all perception. So in neither perception nor non-perception, the thoughts that arise, these are what I call proto-thoughts, the sankharas or samskaras. They give rise to certain kinds of patterns, certain kinds of shapes, certain kinds of colors, certain kinds of thoughts, but they don't fully form into a fully perceived thought. Therefore, it is neither perception nor non-perception. And then there are layers to this quiet mind. As you get deeper and deeper, you start to see that the mind becomes utterly still. And it can remain in that stillness for a long period of time. 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes at a time. An hour and a half at a time. 2 hours at a time. 3 hours at a time. Not a single thought in the mind. Not a single thought. Just awareness. Just the luminosity of mind. Now here's what's the interesting thing. It says he emerged mindful from that attainment. In other words, when he was in neither perception or non-perception, you couldn't fully identify the different things that were going on because that would be full perception. So anytime you are in quiet mind in neither perception or non-perception, and now you start to see something, know that you are no longer in neither perception nor non-perception because you have fully recognized what it is that you're experiencing. So you relax, let go, come back to quiet mind, let the mind relax further into that field of neither perception nor non-perception. But he emerged mindful from that state. So when you come out of that experience, what you do is what he does here. Having done so, he contemplated the states that had passed, ceased, and changed. So for a couple of minutes after you come out of that experience, you review what happened in the mind and allow whatever comes up, patterns, pictures, shapes, whatever it is. And whatever comes up, you siksar. You just let go. Thus, so indeed, these states, not having been, come into being, having been, they vanish. Regarding those states, he abided unattracted, unrepelled, independent, detached, free, dissociated, with a mind rid of barriers. He understood there is an escape beyond. And with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is. Again, because by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, Sariputta entered upon and abided in the cessation of perception and feeling. And his taints were destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. So let's unpack that. When you are in neither perception or non-perception, there comes a point where even mind becomes a coarse object. We will talk about this in a few days, but there is what could be known as jhana 8.5, so to speak. This is the signless collectedness of mind. It is an objectless awareness. It happens gradually. Your mind becomes less interested in itself, and the awareness doesn't take anything as an object. And so the analogy here is you point a flashlight out into the sky, and that light continues beaming up into space, but doesn't land on anything, assuming that there's nothing there. There's no asteroid, no planet, no moon, nothing for the light to land upon. And it just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. But eventually, the fuel of that flashlight, the batteries, they run out. This is because the mind just keeps observing, but nothing in particular. And when it observes nothing in particular and just keeps observing this objectless awareness, no sankharas arise. And because there is no fuel for your mind's attention to hold on to it, the batteries run out and the mind switches off. There is a cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. You don't know you are in that state until you come out of that state. When you come out of that state, certain things happen. And when those certain things happen, you experience wisdom or a level of wisdom. You see for yourself how dependent origination arises. You get a preview into how the Four Noble Truths work. And if you completely understand it, like Sariputta, the taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom, meaning you become an arahant. He emerged mindful from that attainment. Having done so, he recalled the states that had passed, ceased, and changed thus. So having come out of that state of cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness, he saw certain things come up. I'm not going to tell you what those things are. You have to tell me when you have that experience. But whatever those things are, whatever it is that you see, is the seeing of wisdom. Seeing for yourself how this whole process of dependent origination works. We'll go a little deeper into this in the last few days of what actually happens. Because what's happening is that the mind is becoming deconditioned through these processes of jhana and ayatanas, eventually becoming unconditioned and touching the nibbana element. We're going to go deeper into that later, but this is what happens. And so he reviews what happened, and having reviewed it, he says, having done so, he recalled the states that had passed, ceased, and changed thus. So indeed, these states, not having been, come into being. Having been, they vanish. Regarding those states, he abided, unattracted, unrepelled, independent, detached, free, disassociated, with a mind rid of barriers. He understood there is no more escape beyond, because he has touched the Nibbana Dhatu. He has touched the Nibbana element. And with the cultivation of that attainment, he confirmed that there is not. Bhikkhus, rightly speaking, were to be said of anyone, he has attained mastery and perfection in noble virtue, in sila. Attained mastery and perfection in noble concentration, in samadhi. Attained mastery and perfection in noble wisdom, in panya. Attained mastery and perfection in noble deliverance, vimutti. It is, Sariputta, indeed that rightly speaking this should be said. Bhikkhus, rightly speaking, were to be said of anyone, he is the son of the Blessed One, born of his breast, born of his mouth, born of the Dhamma, created by the Dhamma, an heir in the Dhamma, not an heir in material things. It is of Sariputta, indeed, that rightly speaking this should be said. Bhikkhus, the matchless wheel of the Dhamma set rolling by the Tathagat is kept rolling rightly by Sariputta. That is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words.